Tonight, in a WNBF News special report, First Alert meteorologist Marla Branson gets personal with us and shares a story that, despite being fairly common, most people don't talk about.
Good morning, 7:40, and a breakdown of the day ahead.
Who am I?
Our storm planner keeps us pretty much rain-free.
Seems like a simple question.
So if you have plans out tonight,
I never really thought too much about it until recently.
75 right now for Florence, and what you see on the thermometer is what you get. It feels like 75.
I'm adopted. My parents had a tough time starting a family.
I got a phone call about 9:30 in the morning, and it was this doctor friend of mine that was aware of our situation. And he said he had a little girl. So I went over and talked to your mother, and she lit up like a Christmas tree.
My biological mother gave me to doctors when I was born. The process was unusually quick, and I was home with my parents when I was just 6 days old.
Your mother must have been a very brave woman because she knew she could not provide for you. We felt like that she was doing the best she could for the baby that she had.
My parents thought it was best to keep the adoption completely closed.
I just don't know who she is.
They didn't feel the need to know who my biological parents are.
It's in hindsight, I would have done it a little differently.
How would you have done it differently? Because I think
I would have found out who it was, so I could have told you. I should have realized that was my error.
I think you did it right the first time. I don't think there needs to be a hindsight.
Well, then we'll let it stand at that then. And because I have a beautiful daughter that I could not be more proud of, and I have a grandson who is the light of my life, my little blue-eyed sugar. And I have a son-in-law that is really good to my daughter. And I have a son, is what I really have. I have another son. It's been a pretty good run for us.
Love you, dog.
I love you too, baby.
That look my dad has, that love in his eyes. I wanted to know what it was like to love a child so much. That's what started my DNA journey. As my husband and I tried to create a family, I realized I don't know my medical history. It's time for me to learn who I am.
And tomorrow night, Marla will share with us the options out there for discovering your medical history. She'll take us through the next steps in finding out where she came from. That's part 2 of her 3-part series tomorrow night after the Olympics.
I got a phone call about 9:30 in the morning, and it was this doctor friend of mine that was aware of our situation. And he said he had a little girl. So I went over and talked to your mother, and she lit up like a Christmas tree.
First Alert meteorologist Marla Branson found herself in a situation that many people deal with.
Yeah, she was faced with a medical problem and wanted answers, but a closed adoption kept her medical history and ancestry sealed.
And this really left her with no idea what her future health had in store for her. It left doctors with a puzzle and many missing pieces.
While trying to start a family, we had some obstacles to overcome. I was diagnosed with diminished ovarian reserve. Basically, it's like my ovaries are much older than my actual age, and I have a low number of viable eggs. It made getting pregnant seem impossible, exhausting, and emotional. There was no clear reason for the issue, so I naturally thought it must just be bad genetic luck.
You can inherit genetic abnormalities that you don't know about because you don't have that family history.
Because of my closed adoption, not knowing my medical history was one more hurdle in our efforts to have a baby.
That can have significant implications for your current health, your future health, and for your reproductive health.
Fortunately, we were blessed with a baby. But shortly after finding out I was pregnant, I also found out I'm a carrier of the genetic mutation that causes muscular spinal atrophy. If my husband was also a carrier, our son could inherit the disease. I was crushed. The baby we had wanted for so long could potentially only live for hours at best. Thankfully, my husband wasn't a carrier.
It is a challenge when we see couples who come in and maybe one of the couples doesn't know their full medical history.
But I still felt like a genetic time bomb, and I was determined to learn more.
We start by just going over a person's history and seeing what they know about their current health. We then can often listen to their heart and their lungs and do ultrasounds, do a variety of imaging tests to make sure everything else is normal in the body. But we also know that doing genetic testing becomes very important.
I noticed Facebook and TV ads about a company called 23andMe that does DNA testing. The test promises to deliver over 35 reports about whether or not you could pass along genetic mutations or abnormalities.
It is fairly common. We have more adoptees as customers of 23andMe than you would expect.
With the 23andMe test, you get carrier status reports, a breakdown of your ancestry based on your DNA, interpretation of various traits, and the ability to find and reach out to DNA relatives that have also taken the 23andMe DNA test. The $199 price tag seemed fair. I was pretty excited when the box came in the mail. "Welcome to you," smartly printed on it. Spit to fill line, detach funnel, screw on cap, seal in bag, and then mail in kit. You register your kit online and mail it back to the 23andMe labs. In a few weeks, an email appears in your inbox saying your results are ready. Again, with the slogan, "Welcome to you." Considering I don't know much about my medical history and nothing about where I'm from, the slogan is pretty deep. All right, here we go. Maybe I had unreasonable expectations, but the butterflies I had when I got the email telling me my results are in quickly faded. No matching relatives. I expected that. My main goal in taking the test wasn't to find relatives, but I have to admit I'm curious. 23andMe did link me up with several distant cousins, but so far I haven't been able to make any connections that would lead me to my birth parents or brothers and sisters. So they didn't have anything in the carrier status. And we know I'm a carrier for muscular spinal atrophy. They didn't even test for it. And what about the BRCA gene, the one linked to an increased risk of breast cancer? No report for that either. Did I waste my money? A lot of these reports are just weird. Earwax type. I didn't pay $200 to find that out. I started to realize maybe I'm looking for answers in all the wrong places.
Wow, quite a journey, and make sure to watch tomorrow night for the final part to Marla's DNA series, especially if you're interested yourself in doing DNA testing.
That's right. She is once again going to talk with doctors about testing options, costs, and what your next steps should be after you get your test results.
DNA testing can be the link to the past that unlocks the future. But I learned in the final part of this WNBF News special report, when it comes to getting those answers, sometimes it's best to leave it to the experts.
See, did they detect anything abnormal?
Not a thing.
Okay.
But you'll notice missing from that list is they don't test for muscular spinal atrophy.
Yeah, why didn't they do that? They didn't do SMA?
No, because it's too hard to test for.
Too hard to test for, but potentially life-changing.
When we decide what types of reports we're giving back to people, part of the decision-making process is how good is our test at detecting those types of changes.
Those types of changes could change a life. I went looking for answers about my past after realizing how much I didn't know when my husband and I started trying to have a baby.
I would have found out who it was, so I could have told you. I should have realized it.
My closed adoption made my medical history a mystery.
In hindsight, I would have done it a little differently.
It was a decision my parents made that was the right decision at that time. But now I want to know more about my past, especially my medical history. A Facebook ad for 23andMe, a company that does DNA testing, caught my eye. But the results I got weren't quite what I was looking for.
So they didn't have anything in the carrier status.
Nothing in the report about muscular spinal atrophy. a genetic abnormality we know I'm a carrier for because my doctor tested me. It happens when a large section of a specific gene is missing.
The type of testing that 23andMe does is not really conducive to finding these large deletions.
And I found not conducive to giving me the information I thought would help me understand my past.
A lot of these reports are just weird.
Because of FDA regulations, the test can't reveal to U.S. customers the result of the BRCA gene report that indicate an increased risk of breast cancer.
As a result of the conversation and process we're going through with the FDA, we're currently limited to offering just carrier testing.
That means you won't find any information from 23andMe about your future health. An online test wasn't the place to get medical information that I needed to understand how my genes could affect my sons.
When it comes to these types of details, skipping spinal muscular atrophy, for example, which is one of the leading causes of neonatal death from genetic abnormalities, is a gigantic miss.
Earwax type? I didn't pay $200 to find that out.
I was discouraged that I didn't get the information I wanted, so I Googled my way to a third-party website that lets you upload your raw DNA data from 23andMe to get a more comprehensive look at your genetic makeup. It showed I was at an increased risk for scary things like Alzheimer's, stroke, and diabetes.
Is 0.5% worth that risk, 0.5% worth doing, ultrasounds to your heart, putting you on statins, putting you on all these medications, and maybe not, right? And so that's the value of the physician consult, so that we're not interpreting this in isolation.
Something that worries Dr. Schnoor. Medicine changes so quickly that it's easy to find outdated information on the internet, and you could do more harm than good by trying to self-medicate or diagnose.
Just having it be on the end cap of a, drugstore with the brightest sign, patients don't know any better. They're going to waste $200 on a test like that. There are commercial companies who use FDA-approved testing that physicians know about, who will charge insurance. And if insurance does not pay because you don't have good coverage, will charge you about $100 for that test.
It's not that 23andMe is a waste of money or a bad test. It was very interesting to see the detailed breakdown of my ancestry and be able to reach out to a handful of people that are distant DNA relatives.
Having those insights, I think, can be very fun and interesting, both from a recreational standpoint, like, wow, did you know we're part Norwegian? To, wow, did you know that we're part Jewish and I should have asked my doctor for carrier testing that is typically targeted to the Jewish population.
Knowing your genetic makeup is important, but where you get that information is even more important. A doctor or genetic counselor will order the right tests for you to avoid over-testing and wasting money. And once those tests come in, they'll help you interpret the results and tell you what your next step should be. The next step for many of Dr. Schnoor's patients is to make sure they don't pass down a genetic abnormality to their children.
We're not randomly screening for everything with the embryos. We're screening for a specific known inheritable disorder from the parents.
This testing helps doctors select the healthiest, most viable embryo to transfer using in vitro fertilization. This cuts down on miscarriages and genetic disorders. My most surprising insight from 23andMe? I'm a tiny bit Mongolian, as well as a handful of other races and nationalities. And somewhere out there, I have a second cousin who also took the 23andMe test that has yet to answer my message. The most important thing I learned through all of this is how maybe it's best I don't know everything my genetic code says about me. It was very easy to get caught up in studies and Google research and forget what I do know for sure, that in this moment, I have a healthy baby boy, and as far as I know, I'm pretty healthy myself. In the studio, I'm First Alert meteorologist Marla Branson for WMBF News.
If you ever heard anything